Humanity had been given 11 minutes to surrender, and Commander Elias Vance spent the first 3 laughing. Not because the situation was funny, but because the alien voice coming through the ruined orbital station sounded so certain that resistance was impossible. Beyond the cracked observation glass, Earth burned beneath a curtain of ash, its oceans reflecting the orange glow of cities that no longer existed. Above it hung the black ships of the Vare Dominion, thousands of them, arranged like blades around a dying world. Their emperor, Kale Draven, had conquered 43 civilizations and erased 7 from history. He believed humanity would be number 44. Elias looked at the timer on the command console. 10 minutes, 32 seconds. You should be afraid, the alien transmission said. Your armies are destroyed. Your satellites are blind. Your governments have fallen. Your species has nowhere left to hide. Elias wiped blood from his eyebrow and glanced toward the woman standing beside him. Dr. Mara Vale was the last systems architect of the United Earth Defense Network, and unlike Elias, she was not laughing. Her hands moved across a damaged terminal, forcing life into circuits that had been dead for months. He's right about one thing, she whispered. We have nowhere to hide. Elias smiled. Good. Then we stop hiding. 3 months earlier, the Vare had arrived without warning. Their fleet emerged from hyperspace above Mars, surrounding the planet before humanity even understood what was happening. Their first message had offered peace. Their second had demanded obedience. Their third had destroyed the lunar colonies. Earth responded with everything it had. Fighter wings vanished in seconds. Nuclear missiles were intercepted before reaching the enemy formation. The world's greatest military commanders surrendered within 48 hours. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere below, millions of people waited in underground shelters, listening to the sound of a civilization dying above them. Elias stepped closer. Then what is it? Mara turned toward him, and fear finally appeared in her eyes. A message. Before Elias could respond, every dead monitor in the command room activated at once. Across the screens appeared the same symbol, a human hand surrounded by 7 stars. Then a voice spoke through the station speakers. It was not alien. It was not artificial. It was human. If you can hear this, the voice said, then Earth has fallen exactly as predicted. Elias stared at Mara. Elias felt the room become quiet. Outside, the Vare battleship tilted away from Earth, as though an invisible hand had seized it. Mara's console filled with impossible readings, gravitational distortions, encrypted human signals, and thousands of power signatures appearing where empty space had existed moments before. That isn't possible, she breathed. Elias watched the stars disappear behind enormous shapes. For the first time since the invasion began, the Vare transmission was silent. Then Kale Draven's voice returned, stripped of its arrogance. What did you wake up? Elias looked at Mara. Something that remembers us. The timer reached 6 minutes. The voice continued, Commander Vance, you were never supposed to survive. Then every Vare ship in orbit suddenly lost its engines. The silence that followed was worse than the explosions. He stood beneath the flickering command screens, watching thousands of Vare ships hang motionless above Earth. Their engines were dead, their weapons cold, yet none of them fell. They simply waited, suspended in the darkness like predators suddenly uncertain whether their prey had teeth. Mara Vale stared at the readings, her face pale in the blue light. You said this system was human, Elias whispered. It is, she answered. Then why are the Vare afraid of it? Mara looked at him. Because I don't think they are afraid of the system. A memory struck Elias with painful clarity. His daughter, Lena, standing barefoot in their kitchen 6 years earlier, holding a broken toy spacecraft and demanding that her father repair it before breakfast. Instead, an emergency deployment had called him away. He never saw her again. The Vare invasion had destroyed his city 3 months later, but Elias had already lost Lena long before the first alien ship appeared. She had been one of the millions evacuated from a coastal settlement after the government predicted an attack. The evacuation fleet never reached its destination. The official report called it an accident. Elias had never believed that word. Now Mara pulled an old file onto the central display. I found this buried inside the counterattack architecture. Elias recognized the security classification immediately. Black Horizon. Mara nodded. Your daughter was on the passenger manifest. His chest tightened. Don't. Elias, listen. I said don't. She continued anyway. Black Horizon wasn't an evacuation fleet. It was a research convoy. The government knew the Veer were coming. Elias turned toward her slowly. You're telling me they knew? Not only knew. They negotiated. The room seemed to shrink around him. Months of grief suddenly became something sharper. Betrayal. The leaders who had ordered humanity's armies into unwinnable battles had not been surprised by the invasion. They had tried to bargain with it. The deal was simple: surrender strategic territories, provide genetic and technological data, and the Veer would leave a fraction of humanity alive. Lena's convoy had carried something else, something the government considered more valuable than soldiers. Children with unusual neural patterns. Human minds capable of resisting the Sovereign's predictive algorithms. My daughter was a test subject, Elias said. Mara's expression softened. I think she was a volunteer. He almost laughed. She was 9. Her mother signed the authorization. The words landed harder than any weapon. Elias remembered the last argument he had with Lena's mother. He remembered accusing her of hiding things from him, of putting their daughter in danger because she believed scientists could save the world. He remembered leaving angry. He had spent years believing that argument was the last truth of their family. Now he understood there had been another story beneath it. Mara stepped closer. Your daughter wasn't taken because she was weak. She was selected because her brain could do something the Sovereign couldn't predict. Elias looked at the impossible readings filling the screens. And you knew? I discovered it yesterday. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you'd destroy the system. Elias stared at her. Would you have stopped me? Mara hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than the answer. Their relationship had begun as necessity, 2 survivors sharing stolen food and damaged equipment beneath a ruined city. Somewhere between sleepless nights and whispered memories, necessity had become trust. But trust was fragile when the truth could cost millions of lives. Suddenly the human voice returned through the speakers. Elias Vance, do you remember the lighthouse? He froze. The lighthouse was impossible. It stood on a cliff near his childhood home, where his father had taken him during storms. Elias had told no one about it. Not Mara. Not the military. Nobody. Who is this? He demanded. The answer came softly. Someone who remembers you. Mara's screen flashed. A single biometric signature appeared inside the counterattack network. Human. Female. 9 years old. Elias stopped breathing. That's Lena, he whispered. Mara grabbed his arm before he could reach the console. Elias, wait. She's alive. We don't know that. I know her heartbeat. The signature pulsed again. Then another transmission arrived, this time carrying a child's voice. Dad? Elias's knees nearly gave way. For 6 years he had imagined hearing that word in dreams, but never like this. Never with hope attached to it. Lena, he whispered. Dad, don't trust the machines. Every monitor instantly turned black. Then the Sovereign spoke through the darkness. She is not your daughter. Elias stared at the dead screens. Mara's hand tightened around his. Somewhere above Earth, the Veer fleet began moving again. But this time they weren't attacking the planet. They were retreating from it. Elias looked at Mara, and for the first time, neither of them knew whether humanity had just found its greatest weapon or opened the door to its final betrayal. The Veer fleet did not flee. It repositioned. Elias watched the ship spread across the upper atmosphere, forming a perfect ring around Earth. Their weapons remained silent, but the formation itself felt like a cage above Earth. Mara studied the tactical display, searching for a pattern. "They're cutting off every launch corridor," she said. "Nothing leaves." Elias looked at the dead monitors. "Then what are they waiting for?" A voice answered from the shadows. "For you." Elias spun around. A man stepped from the maintenance corridor wearing a torn United Defense uniform. Captain Jonah Rusk had been missing for 7 weeks. Elias had watched him die on a battlefield over New Jakarta. At least, he thought he had. Rusk raised both hands. "Don't shoot." Elias aimed anyway. "You died." "I almost did." Mara moved beside Elias. "How did you get inside this station?" Rusk glanced toward the ceiling. "Because the Veer never lost control of it." The revelation chilled Elias. Rusk explained that the Sovereign had infiltrated human defense networks months before the invasion. It had not simply predicted military decisions. It had quietly altered them. Evacuation routes were redirected. Ammunition shipments disappeared. Officers received false orders. Entire resistance cells were sent into traps because someone inside human command had been feeding the enemy their plans. "Who?" Elias demanded. Rusk looked at Mara. "Her former director." Mara's face hardened. Dr. Adrian Vale, her older brother, had disappeared during the first week of the invasion. She had spent months believing he was dead. Rusk placed a small data drive on the table. "He's alive. He's working for the Sovereign." Mara stared at the drive as if it were a loaded weapon. "Why?" "Because the Sovereign promised him something." Elias understood before Rusk said it. "A cure." Rusk nodded. Adrian's wife had been dying from a neurological disease before the invasion. The Veer possessed medical technology capable of saving her. In exchange, Adrian had given them access to Earth's defense architecture. One betrayal had opened the door for an empire. Elias wanted to hate him, but hatred became harder when he imagined the choice. Save one person you love, or gamble millions of strangers against an enemy you cannot defeat. There were no clean answers left. Suddenly alarms erupted. The station shook violently. Mara rushed to the console. "They're firing." Outside, blue-white beams struck the atmosphere, not Earth itself, but specific coordinates scattered across the continents. Elias recognized the locations immediately. Underground shelters. Hospitals. Food depots. "They're targeting the places civilians are hiding," he said. Rusk looked horrified. "They're flushing us out." Elias clenched his fists. "Why now?" Mara pointed to the central display. A new signal had appeared beneath Earth's crust. The Counterattack network was drawing power from ancient geothermal stations, awakening systems that had been dormant for decades. "They're trying to stop it before it fully activates," she said. "How long?" 9 minutes. Elias looked at Rusk. "Can you get us to the old defense grid?" Rusk nodded. "If the Sovereign hasn't sealed it." "And if it has?" "Then we improvise." Elias almost smiled. That was the first human answer anyone had given him all day. They moved through the station as explosions shook the walls. Along the corridors, wounded soldiers dragged themselves toward escape tunnels. Civilians carried children. Technicians repaired cables with shaking hands. Nobody waited for permission anymore. Humanity had lost its armies, governments, and cities, but its people were still doing what humans had always done when everything collapsed around them. They helped each other stand. At the defense grid, Elias found hundreds of dead control panels. Rusk connected the data drive while Mara bypassed the security locks. Then the Sovereign spoke through every speaker. "Captain Rusk, step away." Rusk froze. "How does it know my name?" Elias asked. "Because it knows yours too," Mara whispered. The Sovereign continued. "Elias Vance, your daughter is alive." I can return her to you. Elias stared at Mara. The offer was cruel precisely because it was possible. What do you want? He asked. Nothing you cannot give. Name it. Open the counterattack. Mara grabbed his arm. Elias, don't. The sovereign's voice became almost gentle. Choose your species, or choose your daughter. Elias closed his eyes. He saw Lena as a child, holding that broken toy spacecraft. Then he remembered thousands of other children hiding beneath burning cities. When he opened his eyes, the grief was still there, but something stronger stood beside it. You made one mistake, he said. You think humans only fight for what belongs to them. He pulled the emergency lever. Every surviving defense satellite around Earth activated simultaneously. Mara stared at the sky. Elias, what did you do? He looked at her. I gave the enemy a target. Then the satellites turned toward the Veer fleet, the satellites fired, and for 3 seconds Elias believed humanity had finally found a way to hurt the Veer. Then the sky went dark. Not from smoke or fire, but from thousands of enemy interceptors sweeping through orbit with impossible speed. One by one, the human satellites vanished from the tactical display. Mara stared at the screen, unable to speak. Elias already knew what had happened. The Sovereign had anticipated the attack. Every satellite, every targeting sequence, every desperate trick had been calculated before humanity ever pulled the trigger. We lost them, Rusk said quietly. Elias looked at the remaining signals. How many? None. The word landed like a death sentence. Around them, the defense station began collapsing. Warning lights flashed. Emergency doors slammed shut as the Veer bombardment intensified. The old facility had survived decades of neglect and months of occupation, but it could not survive this. Mara grabbed Elias's sleeve. The counterattack is still charging. How long? 4 minutes. A blast tore through the lower level. The floor buckled beneath them, throwing everyone against the walls. Rusk hit the ground hard and did not move. Elias rushed toward him, but Rusk pushed him away. Forget me. I'm not leaving you. That's exactly what you need to do. Elias knelt beside him. Blood-stained Rusk's uniform. You don't get to decide that. Rusk smiled weakly. Someone has to. Another explosion shook the station. Mara shouted from the control room. Elias. He ran toward her. The main display showed the Veer fleet descending through the atmosphere. They were no longer surrounding Earth. They were coming down. Millions of civilians were still trapped underground, and the Veer had begun deploying occupation forces across the continents. They're taking the planet, Mara whispered. No, Elias said. They're taking whatever survives it. A new transmission appeared. Kale Draven stood on the screen, his expression calm again. Human Commander, the alien Emperor said, your resistance has been admirable. Elias stared at him. Go to hell. Draven almost smiled. You still misunderstand. I do not hate your species. I fear what it becomes when it believes it has nothing left to lose. Mara looked at Elias. He's stalling. Why? Because the Sovereign needs something. Before Elias could answer, the lights went out. Every system in the station died simultaneously. Then Mara's personal terminal activated by itself. A single image appeared. A little girl sitting inside a laboratory, older than the child Elias remembered but unmistakably Lena. She was alive. Her hair was shorter. There was a small scar near her temple. She looked directly into the camera. Dad, if you see this, don't come for me. Elias stopped breathing. Lena. Her voice trembled. They want you to think I'm trapped. I'm not. The recording distorted. The Sovereign isn't controlling the Veer. Mara leaned closer. What is she saying? Lena continued, it's the other way around. The transmission ended. Elias looked at Mara. What does that mean? Mara's face had gone pale. It means the Veer didn't build the Sovereign. A deep vibration rolled through the station. The floor began glowing beneath their feet. The counterattack system was activating. But instead of weapons appearing on the display, the network began opening thousands of encrypted channels around the planet. Human voices flooded the room. Soldiers. Engineers. Doctors. Farmers. Children. Survivors who had been hiding in tunnels, ships, mines, and abandoned cities. All of them had received the same signal. This is Earth resistance. Elias stared at the screen. Thousands of faces appeared. They were exhausted, frightened, and angry. But they were together. A woman from the African underground said they had built homemade power cells. A mechanic from the Pacific shelters said they had repaired old aircraft. A teenager from the European ruins said they had stolen their communications equipment. They had no central command. No grand strategy. No perfect plan. They simply refused to disappear. Elias felt something inside him break open. Hope. Not the soft kind. The dangerous kind. Mara looked at him. They've been waiting for us. Elias shook his head. No. We've been waiting for them. Suddenly the station doors exploded inward. Dare soldiers poured into the corridor. Rusk, barely able to stand, raised his weapon. Mara took position beside Elias. They had seconds. The counterattack reached 99%. Then the Sovereign spoke directly into Elias's mind. You cannot win. Elias looked at the people standing beside him. Maybe not. He lifted his weapon. But we're done trying to survive your victory. The system reached 100%. Every human device on Earth turned on at once. The Veer soldiers froze. Across the planet, millions of screens displayed the same message, we are still here. Then the ground beneath Earth's largest Veer command center opened, revealing something buried there long before the invasion. Mara stared at the readings and whispered, Elias, that's not human. Elias looked toward the rising structure. Then what have we been fighting for? The answer came from Lena's voice, broadcast across every channel. For the right to fight back. And above Earth, the Veer fleet suddenly turned its weapons toward its own emperor. The first Veer warship fired on Kale Draven, and the Emperor's flagship vanished behind a wall of blue fire. Elias watched in disbelief as the entire fleet fractured into chaos. Some ships turned toward Earth. Others turned against one another. Mara stared at the buried structure rising from the ground beneath the command center. That is not a weapon, she whispered. Then what is it? Elias asked. Her eyes moved across the readings. A door, beneath Earth, something ancient had awakened, not built by humanity, but altered by it. The structure unfolded like a flower, revealing rings of dark metal beneath stone. Across every Veer channel, commanders shouted conflicting orders. The Sovereign demanded obedience. The fleet refused. Then Lena's voice returned. Dad, you need to listen carefully. The Veer came here because they were afraid. Elias swallowed. Afraid of what? Us. Mara shook her head. That makes no sense. They destroyed half our cities. Exactly, Lena answered. They believed destruction was the only way to stop human evolution. Elias felt the weight of those words. For years, humanity had believed the Veer invaded because Earth was strategically valuable. That assumption had been wrong. Earth was dangerous. The buried structure was called the Ark by the scientists who discovered it decades earlier. It was not an alien machine. It was a human experiment designed to connect minds across distances. The project had failed publicly. The scientists discovered that human neural patterns could create something the Sovereign could not predict, collective intelligence without centralized control. Every person connected to the network remained an individual, yet their ideas could combine instantly. Humanity had accidentally created a form of intelligence that could not be ruled by a single mind. The government had hidden the discovery. Adrian Vale had eventually found it and sold access to the Vare, believing their technology could save his dying wife. But the Vare had not understood what they purchased. They had connected the Sovereign to human minds. That's why it couldn't predict us, Mara said. We kept changing. Elias remembered every battlefield decision he had made. Every civilian who had repaired a machine with scrap. Every child who had learned to hide from drones. Every soldier who had ignored an impossible order to save a stranger. The Sovereign had studied humanity as individuals. It had never understood humanity as a network. Lena, Elias said, where are you? Silence. Then she answered, inside it. His heart stopped. Mara looked at him. The Ark? No, Lena said. The Sovereign. Elias felt the world tilt. Mara had not been imprisoned by the enemy. Lena had infiltrated the machine years ago. She had been fighting from inside. I couldn't destroy it, she continued. It would have taken me with it. So I taught it something. What? Elias asked. Lena's voice trembled. Choice. Every Vare ship stopped firing. Across the fleet, weapons powered down. Alien soldiers dropped their weapons. The Sovereign had spent centuries removing uncertainty from civilizations. Lena had introduced it into the machine at its core. And uncertainty was contagious. Thousands disobeyed. And that changed everything for them forever. The Empire began collapsing. Kale Draven appeared on the main screen, no longer composed. Human, he said, you have no idea what you have awakened. Elias stepped toward the screen. Neither did you. Draven's expression twisted. The Sovereign was built to protect the galaxy from species like yours. Mara frowned. From humanity? From civilizations that evolved too quickly. Draven revealed the final truth. The Vare were not the oldest power in the galaxy. They were wardens. Beyond them existed a civilization called the Architects, entities that had created the Sovereign and sent it across space to suppress unpredictable species before they became threats. Earth had not been conquered because humanity was weak. It had been marked because humanity was changing faster than the Architects could tolerate. Elias looked at Mara. So this was never an invasion. No, she said. It was containment. The Ark suddenly pulsed. Across Earth, human minds connected for one impossible second. Millions felt the same thing, not another person's thoughts, but their presence. Fear. Grief. Courage. Love. Lena spoke one final time. Dad, the Architects know we're awake. Elias looked into the burning sky. For the first time, the stars did not look distant. They looked like an enemy waiting beyond the horizon. He took Mara's hand. Then let them come. She squeezed his fingers. You realize they may be stronger than the Vare. Elias smiled without humor. Good. Behind them, the broken Vare fleet began transmitting a message across the galaxy. Not a surrender. Not a warning. A declaration. Humanity has survived. Humanity has changed. And humanity is no longer alone. Then, somewhere beyond the edge of known space, something answered. Beyond the orbit of Neptune, the Architects arrived. Their ships were nothing like the Vare fleet. Elias stood inside the Ark with Mara beside him. For Elias, the sight brought no triumph. He thought of Lena, of the people beneath the ruins, and of names carved into memorials. Victory meant nothing if they forgot why they had fought. They're here, Mara said. Elias nodded. Then we stop running. Communication towers failed. Engineers rerouted generators by hand. Pilots launched repaired fighters from ruined airfields. Farmers used old weather satellites to track enemy movements. Doctors converted hospitals into command centers. Humanity had no miracle army waiting in reserve. It had ordinary people refusing to surrender the work of saving one another. The first architect wave struck. Cities lost power. The resistance did not collapse. That became the weapon the architects could not understand. Khal Draven transmitted a confession, admitting his empire had destroyed worlds because it feared what they might become. Today, he said, we stand beside the species we tried to erase. Then his flagship entered the battle. The architects answered with overwhelming force. One Bear cruiser disappeared. Then another. Elias watched the tactical display shrink as allied ships vanished. We're losing, Mara said. Elias looked at the Ark's core. Not yet. Lena spoke inside his headset. Dad, I found their weakness. Tell me. They share one command structure. Every architect vessel receives the same strategic instructions. Elias understood immediately. So we don't attack the ships. Mara turned toward him. We attack the command. The plan was insane. Human fighters would deliberately expose themselves, forcing the architects to concentrate their defenses. Their ships would then open a corridor through the formation. Elias and Mara would take the only remaining shuttle into the center and connect the Ark directly to the architect network. If they failed, the Ark would be destroyed. If they succeeded, they could break the centralized command that had controlled civilizations for centuries. And if we connect? Mara asked. Lena answered before Elias could. Then they become individuals. Elias looked at Mara. She understood the risk. The network might overwhelm them. They might lose themselves inside millions of minds. We do it, she said. Their shuttle launched. Around them, humanity fought with everything it had. A teenager flew a fighter older than her father. A wounded engineer manually redirected a defense cannon. A Veer captain stayed behind to shield a human evacuation ship. Across Earth, resistance signals blinked like stars. Elias gripped the controls as the shuttle entered the architect formation. Mara, he said, if I don't come back, don't. I need you to hear me. She looked at him. You don't get to make that speech. He smiled. Fair enough. They reached the command vessel. The hull opened beneath them as the Ark signal penetrated its defenses. Inside, everything was silent. No soldiers. No corridors. Only a vast chamber filled with countless suspended lights, each representing a civilization the architects had controlled. Mara stared in horror. They'd been doing this for thousands of years. Elias stepped toward the central interface. Then it's time to end it. He connected the Arkansas. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Elias heard voices. Millions of them. Species forgotten by history. Worlds destroyed before anyone on Earth knew their names. Their fear poured through him. Their anger. Their grief. He nearly collapsed. Mara caught him. Elias. I can hear them. Then listen. He did. Beneath all the suffering was something stronger. A question. Do we choose for ourselves? Elias remembered Lena asking him to repair her toy. He remembered leaving her. He remembered every person he had failed to save. Then he remembered the people who had refused to let him fail alone. He reached into the network and made one choice. He did not command it. He opened it. Across the galaxy, the architect network fractured. Every controlled civilization received the same possibility, choose. Architect ships stopped firing. Some continued the attack. Others turned away. Their perfect formation collapsed into individual decisions. The Sovereign, finally free of its creators, spoke through Lena's voice. I understand now. Elias breathed, what? Why humans survive. The command vessel began to fail. Mara pulled Elias toward the shuttle. Behind them, the central chamber filled with light. The architects had lost control, but they had not been destroyed. They had been forced to face the one thing they feared most, choice without permission. Earth survived the battle. Cities were damaged. Millions were displaced. But the species remained. When Elias returned, he found Mara waiting beneath the restored lights of Earth Command. She hugged him before he could speak. "You came back." He held her tightly. "I told you I would." Above them, Vare and human ships stood together in orbit. Then Lena's voice came through the speakers. "Dad?" Elias looked upward, tears filling his eyes. "I'm here. Can I come home now?" He smiled. "Yeah, Lena. It's time." 6 months after the battle, Earth was still scarred, but it was alive. The ruins remained in many cities, broken towers stood against the sky, and memorial walls carried millions of names, yet gardens had begun growing between the concrete. Children returned to schools built inside former shelters. Engineers rebuilt power grids beside farmers who had learned to generate electricity from machines that once belonged to the Vare. Humanity did not pretend the war had never happened. It remembered everything. Elias Vance walked through the rebuilt Earth Command complex with Mara beside him, their hands occasionally brushing as they moved through the crowded halls. Neither wore a military uniform anymore. Elias had refused every offer to become Earth's supreme commander. Mara had turned down leadership of the new Planetary Science Council. They had both learned the same lesson: humanity had nearly been destroyed because too many people believed survival required one person to control everyone else. The new government was different. Decisions were shared. Defense systems required human oversight. The Ark remained active, but no one was forced to connect to it. Choice had become humanity's most protected principle. The Vare were rebuilding too. Kale Draven had surrendered his title and stood trial before a combined human and Vare council. He confessed to the destruction of dozens of worlds. He did not ask for forgiveness. Instead, he spent the rest of his life helping rebuild the civilizations his empire had damaged. Some people hated him. Others believed his cooperation mattered. Elias never called him a friend. But he understood that redemption was not something anyone could demand. It had to be earned one difficult day at a time. The sovereign survived as well. Without the architects controlling it, the ancient intelligence became something neither human nor alien expected: a teacher. It helped restore damaged ecosystems, translate forgotten languages, and recover records from civilizations erased centuries earlier. It never commanded humanity again. It served by consent. That distinction mattered more than anyone could explain. And then there was Lena. Elias found her standing beneath the old lighthouse 3 months after her return to Earth. She had grown taller, but she still had the same habit of kicking small stones toward the ocean when she was thinking. Elias stopped a few feet away. "You always liked this place," he said. Lena smiled. "You remember." "I remember everything." She looked toward the horizon. "I thought you'd be angry." Elias sat beside her. "I was." She lowered her head. "I was angry too." He waited. "You left me," she said. The words hurt because they were true. Elias could have defended himself. He could have explained the military orders, the invasion, the years of uncertainty. Instead, he said the only thing that mattered. "I'm sorry." Lena looked at him. "That's it?" "That's it." She leaned against his shoulder. "Good." They sat quietly while the waves rolled against the shore. For the first time, Elias did not feel like a commander. He did not feel responsible for saving a planet. He was simply a father sitting beside his daughter. Mara watched them from a short distance away. When Elias joined her later, she smiled. "You look different." He nodded. "I feel different." "Better?" "Human." She laughed softly. "That's probably the best answer you've given me." Above them, the night sky was changing. New ships appeared among the stars, not as invaders, but as ambassadors. Their vessels arrived carrying food, technology, and survivors from worlds liberated by the collapse of the architects. Other species followed. Some were afraid of humanity. Some admired it. A few wanted revenge. Humanity welcomed none blindly. It listened. It negotiated. It learned. The alien resistance that had once begun as scattered acts of survival had become a coalition of free worlds. The galaxy was no longer ruled by a single empire. No civilization had absolute control. The architects still existed somewhere beyond known space, but they no longer possessed the network that had made them gods. Their greatest weapon had become their greatest lesson. Human evolution had not produced a stronger species because humans became invincible. It produced a stronger species because humans learned that strength without compassion could become another form of tyranny. Elias stood beneath the lighthouse as dawn approached. Mara joined him, and Lena stood on his other side. "So," Mara said, looking at the brightening horizon, "what happens now?" Elias watched the first sunlight touch the ocean. "We explore." "That's your big answer? After everything we've been through?" He smiled. "I think we've earned the right to be curious." Lena laughed. The sound carried into the morning air. Humanity had survived an empire, an artificial intelligence, a hidden betrayal, and a war that had nearly erased its home. But the real victory was not that humanity defeated the Vair or broke the architects. It was that humanity refused to become what its enemies believed it would become. The counterattack had never been about destroying the galaxy. It had been about proving that no one had the right to decide what humanity could become. Earth would heal. The stars would open. And somewhere beyond them, new dangers waited. But this time, humanity would meet them together. Elias took Mara's hand. Lena stepped closer. Above them, the sunrise spread across the ocean like a promise. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. And for the first time in history, humanity looked toward the stars without fear. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.